The alarm screamed through the 49th floor like sirens in a war zone. Smoke coiled through the halls. Chaos spread like wildfire. But while everyone was running for their lives, one man ran the other way, toward the blaze. He wasn't a firefighter. He wasn't security. He was just a single dad with calloused hands, a faded backpack, and something clutched inside that no one expected to matter, until it changed everything. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. The first thing Madison Blake noticed as the fire alarm blared wasn't the chaos. It was the man sprinting up the stairs. Everyone else was shoving for the exits, panicked and loud. But this man, he was steady, eyes locked forward, like he had a purpose far more personal than survival. She didn't know his name. She didn't know he was the same janitor who fixed the flickering office lights 2 nights ago, politely refusing the tip she offered with a quiet "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job." But right now, while her team screamed about documents and data and stock reports, Madison stood frozen by the conference room door, staring at the man who vanished into the smoke like he'd done this before. Like this wasn't his first fire. Then she heard it, a cry from the corner office. And the weight of her position, CEO of Ellison Technologies, snapped her out of her trance. One of her interns was trapped. She turned to call for help, but before she could finish shouting, the same man burst out from the smoke, carrying the intern in his arms, coughing hard but eyes sharp. He handed her off to security, barely acknowledging the cameras or the frantic gratitude from bystanders. Madison locked eyes with him. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He just pulled a tattered notepad from his pocket and dropped it. It hit the floor face up. There were complex equations scribbled across the pages. Formulas, graphs, algorithms she hadn't seen since her MIT days. By the time she looked up, he was gone. The elevator was offline. Smoke still curled from the vents as Madison stood clutching the notepad, stunned. Her assistant pulled her sleeve. "Ma'am, we need to get you to the ground floor." But Madison wasn't hearing her. Her eyes were locked on the pages. These weren't just scribbles. They were theoretical layouts, complex systems designs, mathematical proofs bordering on revolutionary logistics optimization models. There were notes about heat displacement, rapid load balancing across modular systems, and something that looked eerily like a sketch of Ellison Tech's failing AI logistics routing engine, but solved. And it was written in pencil, on a janitor's notepad. On the curb outside the building, medics treated smoke victims. Her shoes clicked on the pavement as she surged through the dispersing crowd, pushing past suits and uniforms. The man was nowhere in sight. "Did anyone see where the janitor went?" she asked security. The guard glanced up from his clipboard. "Which janitor?" "The one who carried the intern out. Tall, early 40s, dark hoodie, scruffy beard, kind of worn-down work boots." He squinted. "Oh, that's probably Colton. Colton Reed, night staff. Comes in for cleanup and light repairs." She blinked. "Night staff. Yeah, been here 3 weeks. Always quiet. Shows up, does his job, leaves. I think he's got a kid or something. A single dad, with one notepad that might hold the key to saving her crumbling logistics division." That night, as her team worked in silence inside the executive boardroom, Madison sat alone in her office, reviewing each page of Colton's notebook. She didn't understand everything, but what she did understand terrified her. Not because it was flawed, but because it was perfect. Ellison Technologies had been bleeding for months. Their signature AI supply routing system had crashed during a major rollout, losing the company over $17 million in contracts. Their patents were outdated, their innovation had plateaued, and shareholders were circling like sharks. Now, in her hands, from a man paid minimum wage to clean the lobby floors, was a solution. She stayed in the building overnight. The next morning, she was in the basement. "Colton Reed," she said, pushing open the janitorial locker room door. The man looked up slowly, mop in hand, eyes tired from long hours and years of keeping his head down. He looked at her like he was used to being invisible. "Yeah, I need to talk to you." He nodded once, slow and unsure. "About the fire?" "No, about the math." His brow furrowed. She stepped forward. "This," she lifted the notepad, "this could be worth millions. It could save jobs. My company. My reputation. But more than that, Colton, it's brilliant." "How did you?" He sighed, voice low. "Used to teach math. Systems engineering. MIT. Left after my wife died. Had to raise my son. It got complicated. She paused. MIT. He gave a small nod. I've been sketching ideas on my break. Just keeps my brain moving, you know. She whispered. You could have walked away with a check last night. Or a job offer. Or, I don't want charity, ma'am. I want work. Honest work. That's all. No, she said, stepping forward, eyes wide with something like urgency. You don't understand. I need you. He tilted his head. You're offering me a mop upgrade? I'm offering you a lab, a team, a title, and a damn office with windows. If your work can do what I think it can, we can revive Ellison from the ground up. Colton looked down at his worn boots, silent for a beat. Then, softly, I don't know if I belong in a boardroom anymore. Madison shook her head. No offense, but that notebook says otherwise. She reached out. And if you say no, I'll be the one mopping floors when Ellison collapses next month. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. I'll need to pick up my son from school first. The wind scraped cold against Colton's denim jacket as he waited near the elementary school gate, one hand buried in his pocket, the other clenching Madison's business card. He could still hear her words echoing. I need you. He hadn't heard that in years. Not without a trace of pity, not from someone powerful, not from someone who looked him in the eye like he mattered. The school bell rang, and the noise of children burst through the front doors. Colton's son, Jamie, came running toward him with a toothy grin and his backpack bouncing wildly. Dad, you're early. Yup. Colton smiled, ruffling Jamie's hair. Felt like today was going to be different. Jamie's face lit up. Can we get grilled cheese on the way home? Colton hesitated. He looked down at the wrinkled bill in his pocket. Tell you what, he said. How about we go home, and you make the grilled cheese? You're the master now. Jamie nodded excitedly, oblivious to the storm brewing behind his father's calm eyes. That night, after Jamie was tucked in, Colton sat at the kitchen table under the weak light of a hanging bulb. His fingers hovered over his notepad, pages of ideas he'd once scribbled between janitor shifts, homework help, and late-night tears. For years, his brilliance had been buried under grief, sacrifice, and silence. And now, out of nowhere, someone had seen it. He flipped open the notebook and began writing. Not for recognition, not for fame, but because for the first time in years, he believed in his own mind again. 3 weeks later, Ellison Technologies' headquarters buzzed differently now. Rumors spread fast that a janitor was now part of the executive tech team, that the company's future was now in the hands of a quiet single dad who wore steel-toed boots to the boardroom. Colton stood in front of a 10-foot whiteboard, equations sprawling across it like an elegant symphony of numbers. Madison watched from the glass doorway, arms crossed, eyes scanning every gesture he made as he translated the chaos of global logistics into actionable code. I still don't get it, her assistant muttered. Why him? Why now? Madison turned. You weren't in that fire. You didn't see what I saw, and you definitely didn't see what was in that notebook. She stepped forward and knocked once. Colton turned. Got a moment? She asked. Only if you don't mind blackboard dust, he said with a half-smile. Madison smirked. I've got worse things on my blazer. As they walked through the corridor toward her office, Madison spoke gently. The board is asking questions. I figured. They don't like the idea of trusting a company's revival to someone without a recent resume. Colton shrugged. Didn't ask for their trust. Just asked for space to work. She stopped walking. And I'm giving it to you. But Colton, if this works, if we launch the new predictive engine and beat Alvintech's bid next quarter, you'll be the one who saved the company. He looked at her, eyes tired but unafraid. That's not why I'm doing it. Then why are you? He turned to the window, watching the city glow below. Because someday, when Jamie asked what his dad used to be, I want him to hear the right story. 2 months later, the lights dimmed in the Ellison conference hall. Investors, press, rivals, they were all there. Colton stood behind the curtain, nerves twisting in his gut. Jamie sat in the front row next to Madison, clutching a juice box and watching the stage like it was a Marvel movie. Madison turned to him. You ready? No. Too late. She grinned. Go. The curtain rose. Colton stepped forward, voice steady. 2 years ago, I was mopping floors. Today, I'm going to explain how we fixed one of the most complex logistical nightmares using nothing but recycled code, an empty garage, and a few forgotten equations. He clicked the projector. Diagrams exploded on screen. Simulations ran live. Investors leaned forward. Tech analysts took furious notes. And when it was over, silence hung in the air, then exploded into a standing ovation. Colton's eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Jamie, whose smile made every second of struggle worth it. Madison stepped onto the stage beside him. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the mind behind Ellison's rebirth. She raised his hand in the air, and for the first time in years, Colton Reed didn't feel like a ghost from his former life. He felt seen. He felt whole. He fell back. It was raining the next morning when Colton stepped out of the newly assigned office, his name etched on the frosted glass, something he hadn't seen in over a decade. The air smelled like wet concrete and second chances. He was no longer just a man who waxed the floors after hours. Now, he was the architect of Ellison Technologies' second breath. But not everyone was celebrating. Whispers floated through the halls. He's just a janitor with a lucky break. She handed him a lab. For what? Sketches on a notepad. How long before this backfires on her? Colton heard them, every word, but he didn't flinch, because he wasn't there for approval. He was there to build something his son could be proud of, and that meant burying his ego, tuning out the noise, and doing what he did best, solve problems no one else could touch. That morning, as Madison walked into her office, she found a sealed folder on her desk. Inside were 60 printed pages, diagrams, annotations, and code blocks. At the top, handwritten in pencil, E-Core, Ellison's new brain. CR. She sat down, coffee forgotten, eyes racing across the pages. It was everything their engineering division had failed to create in 2 years. Streamlined, adaptive architecture for dynamic supply chains, real-time self-correction protocols, predictive failover strategies, all laid out with a clarity that felt surgical. Her phone buzzed. Board call, urgent. Madison didn't flinch. She stood, smoothed her blazer, and walked into that boardroom like a woman holding nuclear codes. The room was a shark tank. 11 men and women in suits, staring her down. Let me guess, she said, placing the folder in the center of the table. You're here to ask why I promoted a janitor. No one answered, but the silence said it all. She flipped open the folder. This is what your engineers failed to build in 2 years. This system came from the mind of a man who's been working nights to raise his kid, who lost his wife, who gave up tenure at MIT because he needed to keep food on the table. A hand went up. Madison, we understand your emotional investment, but this isn't a charity. She leaned forward, calm but sharp. And I'm not running a damn shelter. I'm running a tech empire. And if any of you actually read what's in this folder, you'd see he's already 10 steps ahead of Alvin Tech. Someone else spoke up. Let's say we greenlight this. What happens if it fails? Your janitor becomes a PR disaster. She didn't blink. Then I fail with him. And I'll still sleep better than any of you, because I backed genius when I saw it, no matter what uniform it wore. Silence. One by one, hands went up to vote. Unanimous approval. That night, Colton didn't go out to celebrate. He sat on the worn couch in his tiny apartment, Jamie asleep in his arms. He stared at a picture frame on the wall, his wife, Danielle, laughing on the beach. The last photo they took before cancer swallowed everything. I finally did it, he whispered. Took a while, huh? He didn't hear the knock on the door until the second time. It was Madison, standing in the hallway with 2 bags of takeout and a bottle of root beer. No champagne, he asked, blinking. She shrugged. You look like a root beer kind of guy. He stepped aside. They ate quietly at the table, while Jamie snored softly in the background. Halfway through dinner, Colton looked up. You ever wonder why someone like you saw someone like me? Madison set down her fork. You didn't see yourself the way I saw you. That's the problem with brilliance buried in grief. It forgets it's still alive. He smiled faintly. I thought I was done. Thought I peaked years ago. You were never done, she said gently. You were just waiting for the world to stop overlooking you. They sat in silence for a long time. 2 people from opposite ends of the world, bound by an unspoken respect deeper than any title. Then Colton reached into his notebook again. There's more, he said, eyes gleaming. This was just phase 1. Madison's breath caught. You're telling me this whole time That wasn't even your full idea? He nodded. And the future of Ellison Technologies, of both their lives, shifted again. The first snowfall of the year drifted down over the Ellison Tech campus, cloaking the metal and glass in a soft white silence. Inside, the labs were lit late into the night, brimming with momentum, energy, and awe. Word had spread beyond the company. Forbes was drafting a feature. Wired called it the comeback of the decade. Tech World called Colton Reed the ghost genius in boots. But Colton never read the articles. He was too busy building. On a quiet Friday afternoon, Madison entered his lab. Not the corporate, sterile space it used to be, but a warm, lived-in space now cluttered with blueprints, coffee mugs, half-built models, and a corner table where Jamie's math homework sat next to quantum design notes. She watched Colton sketch lines of code on the wall with dry erase markers, like a conductor mid-symphony. "You've been here for 12 hours, she said. He didn't look up. 12 well-spent hours. She approached quietly. "You should rest." He stopped, capped the marker, and finally turned. "You ever get scared?" he asked softly. "Of what?" "That this all disappears again. That I blink and wake up in that supply closet, wondering if this was all just a break I didn't deserve." Madison leaned against the table beside him. "You earned it every second you didn't stop trying. You just needed someone to open the damn door." He looked down. "Sometimes I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a world that moved on without me." She smiled. "That world's catching up now, Colton, and it's standing in your shadow." The collapse of Alvantech. 3 weeks later, Colton's newly launched e-core system passed its final trial, outperforming the industry's standard by 62%, reducing shipment losses, cutting delivery delays by 44%, and saving Ellison a projected $88 million over 18 months. Meanwhile, rival firm Alvantech faced a catastrophic system failure during a military logistics trial. Their data routing collapsed under high-volume pressure, an exact failure Colton had predicted 3 months ago, and one Ellison's board ignored back then, until he showed them the math. The press swarmed. Colton's name surged online. Reporters knocked on his door. And every time, his answer was the same: "I'm not the story. The math is." But that wasn't true. He was the story. Months later, awards gala. The National Science and Innovation Council was honoring Colton Reed with the Breakthrough Systems Medal, a ceremony held under dazzling chandeliers and velvet curtains. CEOs, senators, and scientists watched as the man in a borrowed suit walked quietly to the stage. He looked down at his hands, still calloused, still humble. Then he faced the microphone. "I used to clean offices like this. Sometimes I'd sit in the back row while geniuses talked about ideas I used to study before life got complicated." Laughter rippled gently across the room. "But I never stopped dreaming. I never stopped scribbling." He looked out at the crowd. "My name's Colton Reed. I'm not a prodigy. I'm a father, a janitor, a widower, and I'm someone who believes that sometimes the right mind is just in the wrong uniform." Thunderous applause. Backstage, Madison waited with Jamie, who was now 10 and beaming with pride. As Colton stepped down, Jamie ran into his arms. "Dad," he whispered, "you're a real superhero now." Colton laughed, holding his son close. "No," he said, "I've always been your superhero. The world just finally noticed." 1 year later, a new nameplate was mounted on the R&D wing, the Colton Reed Innovation Center. For every mind the world almost missed. Inside, students, interns, and thinkers from underprivileged backgrounds now collaborated under the mentorship of the man who used to scrub their hallways. Madison stood beside Colton at the ribbon cutting. "You built something bigger than tech," she whispered. "You built a new definition of what brilliance looks like." He gave a soft, grateful nod. And that night, while the city twinkled outside and the wind howled like an old ghost trying to find its way home, Colton tucked Jamie into bed. "What's next, Dad?" Colton smiled, pulling the covers up. "Tomorrow," he said, "we build something even better." And with that, the man who once swept floors beneath blinking lights drifted into sleep, no longer haunted by the past, but inspired by the legacy he was now living.